Hello and welcome to Mr. Lamb's Science Corner. Today we're going to take a look at a toy, and it's just about, I would imagine, the oldest toy we can find. It's called a rattleback or a celt, and I prefer to pronounce. Some people will say a celt, um, and I prefer celt, and so which causes confusion sometimes. You go to Boston, and it's the Boston Celtics. Uh, and I apologize to anyone from Boston if that offends you. But the rattleback, it's an interesting little toy. I'll show you what it does here. And it's the shape of it, if I can get this here. Oh, yeah, there we go. We'll do this is, sorry about that. Is semi-ellipsoidal. An ellipse, of course, is a kind of a flattened out circle. Ellipsoidal would be a three-dimensional version of that. We talk about the Earth as being kind of ellipsoidal, and semi would be half that, and so I'm not exactly sure. There we have the word. It might be a cute little math word to look up. But basically, what you do is that if, depending upon how it's designed here, it's designed so that if you spin it this way, it doesn't spin too well. In fact, it will come back, and if you have less friction on the tabletop, it will actually come back and do like a complete turn or two. And that's why they call it a rattleback, because as it spins, it starts rattling and then comes back. But the weird thing is, if you spin it the other way, it will spin perfectly fine. Which leads me to how, quite frankly, one of the ways I tortured my students is that I had two of these. I always grabbed the blue one because blue is, Mazama blue, and I had a red one, which was the color of the other high school in the city school district. When we were in the city school district, we moved. We didn't actually move, but changed districts. Long story. And I would have a student grab the red one and say, give it a spin. And most people, I have found, when they give a spin, will spin it in a clockwise way. And of course it doesn't work too well, and I would always kind of tease them about that, because I'd take mine and say, look at this. I'd spin this, and I would say it must be because Mazama, being blue, is a virtuous color and it works very well, and red, being the ugly color from the other side, wouldn't work very well. And sometimes they believe you. What can I say? The rattleback itself, I just looked it up, have been found in Egyptian and Celtic grave sets, especially of children. So it's apparent that that they had these toys back into basically prehistory, and I've actually seen it described elsewhere as cavemen had this, because this type of design, even though it's kind of very sophisticated, will show up in nature. So if you're walking by a stream bed and you have a lot of water-worn stones, you might be lucky enough to find one that exhibits this rattleback. Another thing that I would do, and because I always like to, even though I'm a science teacher, I always like to bring in weird words and things like this, so that show the students that there's some interesting stuff out there. If you spin it clockwise, it doesn't work too well. Although you can get them where it doesn't work too well either way. But most commonly, it will not work well on going clockwise, and it will work fine going counterclockwise. And if you look, you'll see a word called widdershins, which means spinning in a counterclockwise manner. And I was introduced to this word in a science fiction book, where more of a fantasy book, I suppose, where this guy's walking along and there's a gnome or an elf or I can't remember something, and he tells him he has to go to a magical land, and the guy kind of goes along with that, and the elf or whatever tells him to walk widdershins, and the guy went, well, what's that? And the elf thought the guy was pretty ignorant if he doesn't know what the word widdershins means, and tells him in a counterclockwise manner, and sure enough, the guy shows up in the magical land, and he's a prince of this and that, and all kinds of adventures happen. But the key here is, if you're walking along in the woods and you meet an elf and he says walk widdershins, now at least you'll know what he's talking about. I almost forgot to tell you where to buy these things. You can buy them in almost any science museum. This happens to be given to me at the National Science Teachers Association National Convention, and it was from a company called Science First. And I'm sure that you can buy them. I've seen them in the Flynn catalog. I've seen them in other catalogs. You could go to a science museum, and science museums are kind of all over the place. If you're in San Francisco, the Exploratorium. If you are in Portland, Oregon, OMSI. Seattle, of course, has the Science Museum that's left over from the 1962 World's Fair that is magnificent. Even Arkansas, I don't want to say even Arkansas, but Arkansas, because we lived there for 4 years, has a science museum in somewhere between Hot Springs and Little Rock. I think it's a town called Murfreesboro. I maybe have a problem there. They have a huge quartz crystal that is like this big. I mean, it's huge, and it's got some really great hands-on stuff. I took a science club there one time, and it was they had a blast. So if you're ever in Arkansas, and I think it's a town called, it's somewhere in central Arkansas, take a look at it and see if you can find it. But every science museum has a store, and so in these things are found everywhere. So either by catalog or science museum. Okay, take care.